So we have some big leaks about the Panasonic S1H Mark II, and I'm actually really excited about it, and it may be enough for me to leave Sony for good. So these specs are coming to us via Simon, the Ordinary Filmmaker, and he seems very confident in these rumors, and he is a friend of the channel, so I do believe these specs are at least fairly accurate, but we are still dealing with rumors here, so I guess take it as you will. So before I dive deep into these specs, quickly let me give you a little bit of a backstory about my personal camera journey and where I kind of ended up with Sony as my primary, and Canon is kind of like the person I cheat on Sony with. I started off my camera journey with the Fujifilm X-T20, and it was a beginner entry level camera, and I really enjoyed it. I actually still have it until this day, but when I wanted to move up to full frame and kind of up my game, I really wanted to go all out and get a camera that I could grow into. At the time, everybody was waiting for the fabled A7S III to be announced. Frono's Photo did his April Fool's joke about the A7S III specs, and he gave it all these incredible specs, saying it was going to have 6K and it was going to have a fan and do all kinds of amazing things. And I was getting all excited, and it was like the first time that I'd ever heard his April Fool's joke. I was, this is going to be the best camera ever. And then of course it was an April Fool's joke, and my dreams were shattered. And then something kind of interesting happened. Panasonic announced its trio of cameras, one of them being the Panasonic S1H. And honestly, I was blown away. Pretty much all the specs that Frono's Photo was saying was going to be in the A7S III and was like the wild speculation specs back then was actually in the Panasonic S1H. It had 6K, it had all kinds of crazy capabilities, it had 10-bit, it had the vector scopes, it had pretty much anything a videographer could wish for way back then. And I almost bought it. Multiple times I almost hit that little trigger and said, this is gonna be the camera for me, I'm gonna go for it. And the one thing that held me back was the autofocus. I knew that I didn't know enough to be a manual focuser, and I knew that the autofocus of that camera was vastly inferior to what Sony was offering and also what Canon was offering. And so instead of going with a video-centric camera, I actually went with the Sony a7R IV because at the time that was a newer camera, and I knew that it didn't have very good video specs, but I thought, hey, I can sell this one day and get the A7S III whenever it actually comes out. So that's kind of the path that I went with. There's been some sidetracks along the way, and Canon has crept into my life, but Panasonic has never really left the back of my mind, and I've always wished for Panasonic to do some really great things. And I thought multiple times that if Panasonic had went with phase detect autofocus back then, that maybe we'd have a completely different camera landscape at this time. So fast forward to today, and the Panasonic S5 II came out with phase detect autofocus finally, and it seems to be doing a very good job. And it has some amazing Panasonic features that you pretty much only get from Panasonic. And I was very intrigued and still am very intrigued by that camera. And as much as I like the A7S III, I feel like Sony has really been losing a lot of my trust with not supporting their older cameras, not updating them with any of the features that they have with maybe a camera that just came out 5 or 6 months later or a year later that's maybe lower down on the totem pole as far as that goes. It gets new features that is just completely ignored in their other cameras. Focus breathing compensation being just one of the many things that basically was never given to the A7S III. So Sony has kind of started to, I don't know, give me some bitterness. And the specs of this S1H Mark II, without further ado, is pretty insane. So let me go into it. Apparently this will have between a 47 and 50 megapixel sensor. It will have 8K at up to 60 frames per second. It will not only have that, but it will have 8K 24, 25, 48, and 50 frames per second. And I know a lot of people think that, 48 frames per second is kind of a weird number. And yeah, it is a weird number, except for the fact that more than likely you can get true 24 out of this camera. So if you want to truly double your frame rate, you can shoot with 48 frames per second. This will have the new phase detect autofocus. Can I get a like and subscribe for that? It will have 4K oversampled, likely to 120 frames per second. So hopefully this will be being oversampled from that 8K. I think that would be awesome if it is. This will also have 6K RAW, not just 8K, so 6K RAW as well. I'm assuming that they're gonna be doing that by cropping into the sensor, kind of like the Red cameras do. And I mentioned 6K RAW. This will also have 8K RAW, and not just any RAW. It will have 8K RAW, but it will also have ProRes RAW, which I'm not sure how they're working that out with the licensing from Red. Maybe finally Nikon is going to win that lawsuit. Now, as far as reliable information, that is pretty much all we have, but apparently this camera is coming very shortly, meaning that probably by the end of March or within the next 30 days, we should be getting an announcement about this camera. And honestly, I'm super excited about this camera. I think it's going to be a great camera for a lot of people. And more than likely, if it's as good as it seems to be, and if the autofocus is as good as the S5 Mark II was with these specs, this will probably be the recommendation that I will give for most videographers when it comes to cameras. Now, will I actually switch from Sony? I don't know that I will, just because the fact that the A7S III does pretty much everything that I need it to do, and I do have the Canon R5C, which is a great camera as well. So I don't know if I will actually wind up switching, because at this point it is a tool, and these tools do the job that I need, and I'm still growing into these tools. But overall, I'm very excited for Panasonic shooters, and maybe, who knows, one day I will stop getting these beatings by Sony and we'll switch. What are your thoughts on this camera? Drop in the comment section below and let me know. Are you excited about it? Are you going to switch from Sony? Are you going to go for Panasonic? If you've liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. It really helps out the channel and I very much appreciate it. And until next time, peace.